freak out men, like the primitive man was afraid of thundering.
Yeah, acoustic stage.
Each new technology creates a frequency that is first perceived by the seers and by the artists, and they start trying to help people to change their perception, to balance to this new frequency.
To the new silence.
But most people
Dave's talking about noise, and Ian points out, no, Dave, it's silence. It's balance. So that's just a subset on what you're saying about balance. That was a key point at the end of the Dave talk conversation. Balance versus noise.
Wow.
Yeah, like Dave thought the exchange among the AC and DC currents was canceling out because he couldn't hear anything. And I said, no, that's balance. When you arrive at silence, that's balance between the currents. That was a major percept for Dave.
Dave.
Yes, because usually opposite frequencies that are the same cancel themselves.
And it looks unproductive.
So
it looks like, we didn't get any motion out of that. No friction.
Yeah, but
and remember, McLuhan quotes Samuel at silence. And McLuhan quotes Samuel Taylor Coleridge, the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. We were the first to break into that silent sea. Talking about him and Ted Carpenter. The silent sea.
And he says then everybody starts having phantom pain, and nobody can really understand what's going on, what's the cause of this not feeling right, not feeling good, feeling sad, sick, or
out of sorts. And they think it's a lost childhood or something. Oh, shit, I can't be a teenager anymore. You know, they romanticize it as perfectly as an earlier condition.
McLuhan explains it, people feel nostalgia, they start looking back, they think they have fear because they see there is new knowledge for the new technologies being required, and you have maybe a skill that is good for a mechanical society but is not good for the new information societies, and everything you learn now is obsolete so fast, so people feel endangered and in fear and
ripped off. They get bitter. The postmodernists call it ressentiment. They get incredible bitterness, which many people try to explain Trump as riding on a wave of voter anger and resentment. But it's more than that. It's not limited to that. That's a sub-factor of the chemical body, but it doesn't include the other factors of the other bodies that Trump is communicating to. So it's never, if you refer to chemical bodies...
that's the thing that you were explaining very well, I think yesterday in the morning, that it's yesterday.
Yeah.
The technology is going to expand yourself, but at the same time feels like an amputation. And maybe you can explain that again. How new technologies and expansion at the same time gives you this phantom pain.
So you take the printing press. It extends the eye. I mean, to read a book, McLuhan said, was having a parallel world. You have the world you can see, your local church and community, and then you read a book which takes you other places. It's in the mind, but it takes you to another world. So it's a parallel world to the medieval world, to the society of 400 years ago. So it's extending you into eye worlds, extends the eye. But because it's so drastic, and it forces the other senses to rally, to balance that, to compensate for, holy shit, the eye is dominating us, guys. So the kinetic sense, the smell sense, and the ear sense, and the proprioceptive sense. We've got to get together and create some other media, usually from the past. What have we got from before that we can balance off the extension of the eye, the new power of the eye? That process of recovery, shock, is summed up by the word numbness, or amputation. Because when you get
who gave you that numb?
Yeah, who gave you that name, says Finnegan's Wake, but it's spelled N-U-M-B. The first technology is your name, and it numbs you. So it extends you and numbs you. So there's a fine interplay between the numbing and the amputation. So actually, because you numb the eye, you extend the eye, because people don't know that's what's happened, they're numb to the new environment. So they know the older environments, which are being changed, so they focus on fixing up the older environments. So you see how the word numbness is another version of amputation. Because when you get amputated, apparently, if you have anesthetics, you recover from it. But you will continue thinking your amputated leg is still there. And you'll feel the pain of the amputated leg. That's called phantom pain. And so all culture is people remembering folk songs, or in the Reagan era, remembering small-town America that Reagan represented in the early 80s as you went into this global theater. So they had a phantom pain missing the little town. They're forgetting that the little town was hell when they were living in it, when it was the invisible environment. But you naturally think when it got cut off and numbed that you want to go back there. So you're actually numb to what the little town was. So then the town is an old cliche or an archetype that's retrieved as a new cliche, a new probe. So Reagan took the cliche small town thing, made it archetypal, and that's the definition of a probe. And that you'll see that spelled out in the book, From Cliche to Archetype. How old archetypes become new cliches, and old cliches become new archetypes. And the normal non-perceptive critic gets lost in a bunch of emotion. Reagan is a fucking fascist. Reagan is trying to bring back old values, and that doesn't fit anymore. Whereas McLuhan comes in, well, it's not bad what he's doing. He's an anti-environment, too. He's the rearview mirror's art form. He's actually providing comfort for people, because you stupid critics don't know how drastic the new world is. What it's done to people. We shouldn't have allowed this digital world to come in. We should have brought it in slowly. We shouldn't have just dumped it on everybody like Gates and Jobs did, and the rest of them, Oracle. So if you're an ecologist, you're not against the past, you're not against the present, you're not against the future, but you have to juggle the ratios of it, and you present a good, clear communication ecology agenda. And that's why when Roxy reads the book, she says, God, McLuhan makes it real simple and real obvious, and it's the best explanation of what's going on. He covers the whole waterfront.
Yes, I do say, now freak out, because this new thunder is going to amputate all their 8 bodies. And this is the extreme pain people are feeling now, and this is the extreme frequency, because instead of creating one more body, is fusing all in one, and this is like
which I was trying to describe today.
Yeah, it's not just your physical body being affected, but all your other bodies being
all your extensions. So I had something to say to that. When Ian was first 6 months, he couldn't tolerate me talking about McLuhan. And we know that he wanted me to get his message, which was the new message, and I didn't know what the new message was at that point. It hadn't all unfolded. And so I learned to not talk about McLuhan. I wanted to, but he wouldn't do it. Then when he started sneaking in McLuhan stuff, I said, wait a minute, you're quoting McLuhan. But the reason he started to do it in retrospect is I was starting to get his message. So I had absorbed the new environment, him, so therefore we could now retrieve McLuhan, because it was obsolete, whether I knew it or not, and talk about it. And he did the same thing later with the 5 bodies. Actually, the 5 bodies was where to explain the 5 bodies, he started using McLuhan. So you can see that all of the models I've been using for 15 years or more, he let me get them beat up. And then when I got Ian's message, he allowed me to talk about them. And he started incorporating it. And so people would hear him through 2010 and 2011 talking about the 5 bodies and try to figure out what it was. But they didn't notice occasionally, well, the 5 bodies emerged and they're not important anymore. They would get confused because Ian was saying, well, study Bob's stuff, so you study the 5 bodies. But every now and then he'd say, well, it's not important. Because Ian was saying the new environment obsoletes the 5 bodies. And he did it again today. He explained where the 5-body model is obsolete. But you still have to go through it and learn it because you're not going to be able to go from Switzerland to ionic knowledge without knowing the intermediate phases of the tiny note chart. You just can't understand. You got to go through the barters of the rearview mirror stages. So I was allowed to pontificate and force everybody to study my stuff. Ion tolerated it 2 and 3 years after he told me to shut up about it. But then we worked out a process where he allowed me to retrieve it for the new audience. That was still way back in 2009 level.
You are not just quoting McLuhan. You are retrieving it, but you are overlaying what you know now from Ion.
Well, that was a couple of years, 2 or 3 years ago. Ion wouldn't let me talk about McLuhan, but then later, once I got the Ion thing, and it helped by having products. We wouldn't have got it without the products because that was concrete and proved something that Ion wasn't just a bullshitter. Is that he would start saying, Bob, yes, McLuhan was good, but you've even gone further than McLuhan. And he would compliment me how I went further and knew more McLuhan than McLuhan, but that was in the occasional statement, Bob, you're fucking stupid. We're sick of you wandering around the wilderness. You haven't got it yet. But in relation to Sasha and Ginny and everybody else, you've got the best stuff. They need to learn it, so we'll let you talk about how you're better than McLuhan. You know what I mean? You see the juggling? There's no consistent perspective there. There's a juggling of figure ground bended on different situations and who's in the audience for the topic. Did you say damn there? And damn, did you say that in there? Like a minute ago?
Both and. I think it sounded like both and. It sounded like both and.
Both and, yes, both and, right. Both and is a literate fusion of visual space, and you got to tease apart what both and is. It's a good phrase, but to visualize both and, you have to be able to know how to read a page of Finneg's Wake, which is showing you both and. And 99.99% of the world can't read Finneg's Wake, so they don't really understand both and until you see it in a page of Finneg's Wake.
Yes, we're going to be able to really read it and see all the things that are there, because I already see a lot.
Right, you're already getting that level. Just as people think you're, just as you get alienated from people because you talk about Ion or you take the drops and your friends aren't interested, if you start showing them Finneg's Wake, they're going, you read that? You're fucking an idiot, man. You can't read that shit. And you're saying, no, you can read it. Another way to get alienated. You're going to get isolated. You're going to lose more friends, Roxy, if you start telling them that you figured out how to read Finneg's Wake.
Yes, because everybody's addicted to streaming now. Everybody's into spending the whole weekend watching 20 episodes of something.
Yeah, that's
streaming
right.
things.
Yeah.
The river run of information.
Finneg's Wake. Joyce began by telling me through the evidence that he wanted to make a fast book. The book had to keep up with the new information overload environment. So he actually streams many themes that are repeated like a streaming that people experience when they watch 20 shows. It's exactly what their experience is, the way it's laid out in Finneg's Wake, where everything is repeated every page, but there's a new twist, like a new episode.
Damn.
Wow.
Damn.
Yeah. If people say, "Are you doing fringe TV? Are you doing TV binging?" They call it TV binging. Are you doing that this weekend, Roxy? Yeah. What are you watching? Oh, Finneg's Wake. What's that? What show is that? Is that on HBO or what? No, it's a book. Well, that's not TV. Yes, it is. It's streaming TV. Well, when did this book come out? Oh, 80 years ago.
Yes, but that's what I said. I surrender because it's like I want to do something else. I want to take a break, whatever. And I only showing everywhere. Sometimes I have to stop and cry and say, "This is really like, okay, I surrender. I cannot escape," because I understand it's becoming the environment.
Right.
So there is no way to say.
I mentioned it to Ion today. How'd it go? You had told me that you got he had endless conversations with Hathor or something all week long. All these dreams all week, right? Very intense dreams, talking to Egyptian goddesses or something.
Yes, but there are other things that, besides the milk, like there is also she look the mirror, like looking back in the mirror, like the Ankh.
Right, the Ankh, yeah. So he had all these things, overload she got. So I mentioned to Ion, I said, Roxy had all these dreams. Oh, yes, man. She thought she could leave. We just gangbanged her, he said. We just fucking dumped this shit on her every time she fell asleep. They just overloaded you. They basically wanted to show you what you're up against, and how you're going to... You go back and listen, which you haven't done, to what he said. It's very funny. You say, well, I'm saying goodbye, Ion. I'm going to leave for a while. Leave? You can't fucking leave. That's impossible. And he actually was telling you something that you would realize a few days later. But he said it all last week. It's quite funny.
Yes.
Hey?
I know.
But the thing is, there was another point there. The milk. Did you hear him do the milk tonight? Or were you disconnected and missed that?
No,
I think you were here.
Heard that.
Yeah, it's pretty neat how the milk was made by the cow, and it can only be done by the cows. Scientists couldn't reproduce milk, it's like a television set where your iPhone is very valuable. The cow produces important substance, so you had to fucking really respect the cow and hope the gods were keeping it going because your economy depended on so much. And it's interesting how it's pure substance. So the eye cell is a new milk leaking into this world. We're sucking off the tit of ion. This ion is a tit squirting this new substance into this world like cows.
Yeah.
And in the movie version of Naked Lunch, that's what David, whatever his name is, the director of that, famous Toronto director, he shows Burroughs and everybody sucking off these weird sugar, like idiocracy movie things. They're just sucking off these heroin things. That's the way people are today, sucking off their chip body, like a milkshake. Now, Bert, Ion said to Roxy last week, you want to know about...
May I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Before I forget, you said a few moments ago that language speaks on its own. And
yes.
For example, in the wake or in some type of poetry or in some music, I have the impression that this is like these compounds, like the milk or the blood, that there is something else. You can see there is the non-physical in there, like in the Bible or the wake that has so many different levels of meanings that many people can read and get a total different book. And I wonder how can that be done? And now I think it's because somehow the non-physical work into that. And for example, he said
you know
also
what it is?
This is what man didn't hold.
So listen to this. This is what Ion
falling
told me
apart because
back
there
in
was no
2010.
physical on that.
Right, but this is how it was done. In Sitting Its Wake, Ginny started looking at it and reading up the different, you read critics and get a handle on it by reading different interpretations of it. And she noticed that there were 3 cycles or 3 rings in the book. And Ian said, no, there's a 4th ring. And so after we heard a little bit more about it, I said, did Joyce know about this? No. Was this the ring that the language was creating? He said, yes. It was the ring of the non-physical part of the book. And he said, if you use the cipher, you will find and see the 4th ring. So I was agreeing with you, Roxy, that there's a 4th level of non-physical speaking through the language of Sitting Its Wake. The 4th ring.
Yes,
and you will hear on Rewrite or on Cash Flow, let me just say this.
Genesis.
You'll hear occasionally Ginny and I winking at each other saying, everybody's talking about something, and Ginny goes, Bob, that's the 4th ring. And I'll go, yeah. Nobody else knew what we were talking about. It was sort of confidential between me and Ginny and Ion. So what were we going to say, Roxy? Don't forget.
Yes, that you can try to do something similar and make funny things and play with the words and nonsense and this and that, but it's not the same. There is this really big non-physical working in not only the chemistry in objects, in like the Temple of Man, Ion said, it's falling apart because the non-physical is not there. And I was telling you that many people that studied the pyramids in Mexico wonder how they still there for so long, because it's just like mud and stones.
Right.
And in Mexico there's a lot of volcanic activity and big earthquakes, and they're not damaged or anything. They are still there. And there's also a lot of rain, but really a lot, like extreme.
Yeah, how come they don't get eroded?
And they hold.
Yeah,
or
now they
fall
don't,
apart.
Yeah, they don't hold completely, and the real stuff will hold completely and still be glowing. And Ion says the architects didn't know how to incorporate real powerful non-physical in their architecture. So Ion's saying, don't worship Schwaller Lubitz's writings interpretation of the Temple Man because it's incomplete. You're going to get better knowledge from Ion than from any expert that ever wrote. Because Ion is the stuff that holds the inventions together, or non-physical products. So I haven't played it yet, but I do a good bunch of questions about the Temple of Man, and Ion goes into some of the meetings and this and that, but he's always saying, Bob, this is not as important as what we're engaging now. It's good to know, because you got these archetypes in your mind. You're hypnotized by Egypt. Yeah. Anybody is. Oh, that's impressive. And they haven't thought through and killed the topic or killed the image. Ion completes it by killing the image, but pointing out what they were, what they didn't achieve, and how we're doing better than them. That brings you into the present.
Yeah, they said something really extreme last week. I heard them. Someone brought up about Emoto, and Ion said, why follow a dead man? Why would you want to follow a dead man?
What a high standard.
Yeah.
I can't be impressed by Bukowski or William Burroughs. I can't be impressed. Why? Well, they fucking died. And Ion is on the level, well, Bob's the greatest. He's still fucking alive. So you should listen to Bob. He hasn't died yet. Listen to the guy or woman who hasn't died. That's pretty high standards, which most people will just, or some people.
But getting this aspect of the mystery landscape that this is the essential fifth element.
Yes.
That is in the things that are to last forever, because otherwise the labyrinth of the man says it cannot be that you can live forever or things can last forever. And that was, he was saying that when he was talking about the porn. This is how come some things last 15 minutes and some last forever. Because that's the element that is part of the compounds or the
real reality, or the solid reality. You know that picture of the Chambord Castle with the lights all lit up, all 150 rooms or whatever it is?
Yeah.
That is what the pyramid actually looks like. Ion has described the full completed pyramid. It's not this dull thing with gray stones. It's lit up like it's emanating energies, like we kind of show the logo on howionic.com. You know, the pyramid on How Ionic was guided by Ion as an expression of the completed pyramid with the, beaming capstone on the top. So that Chambord Castle, the way it's lit up, that's the way the pyramids actually are or will be when we're ready to accept that level. What happened? You can't have dead air. Right.
Well, but okay. So we see each thunder creates like a new art a new pain, and then there is this to look for new
numbness.
And
if you read Eric's book, now you go read Eric's PhD, he will show these different effects in each thunder. The rearview mirror part of that era, the extension of the part, the numbness. It's right there embedded in the 100 letters. It's quite interesting to see that.
Yes, and McLuhan is talking about Siddhartha and how, because of the pain of the people are feeling, they're looking for some type of mystery landscape explanation or New Age, and all these types of archetypes became so popular again, like Carlos Castaneda and Siddhartha. And he says because they're about war. Every new technology brings war. So I suppose there is going to be a big war also. Now, because innovation, one of the results of a lot of innovation is warfare. But
we got all kinds of wars happening. Don't look for a World War II war. Don't look for a World War II or big battalion.
Well, you already
war.
That war started in 9/11. It's the terror and everybody, the potential terrorists and all these memes.
It started in the 80s, the late 70s, early 80s, with Beater documenting who was being killed among the secret services and the secret intelligence agencies. Then May Brussels LaRouche documented all the bodies piling up in the 80s. That was the war on the one-to-one power groupings, because in the global theater, a small group could hijack the whole planet. McLuhan wrote an essay on it in 71, the hijacking of cities, nations, and planets. So a small team could hijack everything, and then another team would come along and knock them off, just like in a James Bond movie. James Bond was describing exactly what was going on between the small, you can't even call them tribes, little coordinated, triangulated teams fighting each other. And the effects of that was these important CIA guys, important lawyers, suddenly they show up dead. Like today, Tony Scalia showed up dead. You know, there's a lot behind that that relates to the election. It's almost like Obama has to get in his liberal before Trump takes over. You know what I mean? They got to get him in there.
Yeah.
Now, Ion says Obama won't put the guy in. Trump will be forced with the problem. But they had to, the stakes were getting high, like in August 2008, when everything was going to collapse in September with the Lehman Brothers and all that. So here you have this important consequence. The Supreme Court is actually the real rulers. And who's on there? So in the crossfire of the heated election, the week that Trump looks like he's moving ahead, you have, as McLuhan said in Take Today, major changes, major financial transactions always have blood accompanying them. We had some blood. This guy on a hunting trip got killed. He got caught in the crossfire of this battle. They were probably scheming to off Trump. So the Trump team got to them first. You know, just like a James Bond scenario. Now, here's something to note, Bert. I wanted to say it half an hour ago. I didn't know what Hathor was. I later get to find out a few days later that Hathor represented milk. And I played Ian telling me it on February 10th. So that's like Wednesday. Well, I then told Roxy this, and she said, oh, you know, Ion, in the middle of talking about these great Egyptian iconography, Ion goes, milk. And then a little later, Ion goes, Captain Beefheart. Now, I didn't know he had said milk, so Roxy knows that. But Roxy didn't know why he said Captain Beefheart. I said, oh, that's because his first album was called Safe as Milk. That's what the Egyptians, they wanted to, the environment had to be safe. And so he says this stuff back last week.
He told you to play that song.
Right, he told me to play Safe as Milk. It's a great song. Or any of the cuts from, I've played songs from that album. It's a really good album. But the point is that Roxy remembered the knowing of Ion. And she said when she heard milk, she's trying to fucking concentrate on the Egyptian thing. And Ion goes, milk. How stupid, Ion, you are. Fuck this milk shit. I want to find out what these Egyptian things are. And she didn't know that it was milk. And remember, I'm there talking to Ion, and Ion says it's in your inbox.
Yeah,
a word that he always says things like that make no sense when he says
and then
them,
3 days
and then
later,
I get it later.
Yeah, he always says at 3 a.m. you'll realize what I'm saying. But what was I going to say? What was I just starting to say, Bert? I said an aspect of it. So he's saying.
You said it was in your inbox. That's what you started.
Oh, yeah. You can hear him. I'm saying, what's it mean? And he's going this and that. And then he goes, it's in your inbox. So he is able. It's not JW. He's able to zap me with the proper image. So I open it, and it's a picture of a milk bottle. Nice, wonderful picture. And I don't even know that's the answer yet. But he's saying, here's the answer, pictorially. I go, milk? He goes, yeah. And then he starts to explain it. But you have to realize the multitasking, the multi-communication. Ian can send me emails while we're talking verbally, and he was doing that on the chat line today. When Corbin comes on, or when there's a distraction, you look on the chat line, and there's all this Ion talking to somebody. He'll take, if there's a lull, he'll communicate to somebody on the chat line. That's pretty fast. He'll carry on another dialogue. It's going to even get worse. Go ahead.
No, I wanted to talk about the substances and the drugs, but go on.
The way Zappa conducted all the rhythms in the band, and he's like dictatorially conducting it, is exactly an image of Ion watching all the different audiences, the different Ionauts, the different chat lines, me, everybody, different media. He's doing how Zappa's conducting. Ion's there conducting, pointing to you, and then to him, and then you do this, you say that. Why are you doing that, Brian? Where's Brian? Where are the lampstands? That's what Zappa was trying to communicate, that multi-level communication, which is going on in the White House. Look at Veep, or Madam Secretary, or even The Good Wife. These better TV shows, they show the complexity of life. What's the one? Yeah, it is. Madam Secretary is pretty good. They show the complexity of the White House and all these different departments communicating and defending itself against all these different media fronts, so that everybody's part fascist, part communist, part Marxist, part monarchist, part anarchist, and part healthy passion for order. That's quadrophenia. That's the way any major executive has to live, because they're interacting with many media, many environments. And Zappa was conducting the way society was and was becoming. And that's why Stockhausen, these guys, all the other people making one little composition, maybe a little bit of other props, they weren't showing the process as accurately as Zappa was. And Finney's Wake showing. Remember, I first heard Finney's Wake as a kid, because my father, I know that he'd gone and had a prior Roxana meeting, because he started calling me Tim Finnegan as a joke when he came home. So I knew that he met with some people. And I didn't know what, I found out later that, that's what James Joyce wrote about. But he just sort of fantasized I was a little Tim Finnegan. And, but he was studying, his bosses studied the Wake because they knew that it was communicating a new level of communication, a confusing level, early Tetra management, that they were living as an intelligence agency. It's like the smart intelligence agencies knew Zappa was expressing the present, and they basically wanted to kill him. They don't like someone talking about them, what he called the Grand Wazoo. And this is, now we went all over this different stuff about Ion and art and history, and we come back to Frank, because even when we digress, we're talking about what Frank is doing. So we had to do this past hour and a half of complex, multiple ionic communication to show you what Frank was doing. I mean, I can see in that video, 1970, way he's looking at different musicians, conducting them, changing. I can see, or anthropomorphize, that's how Ion is seeing everybody listening. And he's directing them, responding, communicating, throwing in ESP.
Yes, and all the concepts of Frank for composing everything happening at the same time for no reason at all, the conceptual continuity and the xenocracy, is how Ion is composing or two, or both.
Yeah.
This plot. This plot is a big composition, and it's very interesting.
Did you say blood? Oh, that's true. Did you say blood?
Plot.
Yeah, B-L-O-O-D, this new blood, yes, which is in the angel diagram. Oh. The change is in the blood.
No, like
they're in rings 6 and 7, or 4, or 5 and 6.
Well, also the blood.
What?
No, I meant B-L-O-T, plot.
B-L-O-T, blot.
Plot.
B-L-O-T.
Plot. P is in Paul, well, plot. What? She said plot.
Oh, P is in Peter, the plot. Oh, okay, I'm saying blood. Well, the plot is the blood. Yeah. Yes, Joyce would write the plot as blood. He'd write as B-L-O-T, blot. That would mean blood, the plot is blood, new blood. Yeah, okay, I got it.
But actually it's perfect because, the plot is the blood.
That's the new song, the new blood. And you know when?
And in a way, Zappa explaining those concepts, it's also explaining how this complex plot is being.
And you have McLuhan
brought forth
in one of those records.
Played.
You have McLuhan in one. What?
Yes, it's just like a song being played, and we are sort of listening, analyzing, understanding the different parts of this composition.
We have on recording McLuhan in one of those Tony Swartz in the late 60s. They're writing a letter to his grandchild. And McLuhan says these words, you will notice that your blood has been changed. You have a new blood. What's it like with new blood? Now, he's not, I don't think he's thinking about it unless he knew, but let's say he didn't. But his words knew what to say. Who would say, oh, how are you enjoying your new blood? Which is really what one would know was going to come if you knew Ion. So there's language predicting the future right there in McLuhan's statement. So I probably was attracted to Zappa since I was living in Iondom already for 40 years. On a deep level, as Ophanel, I knew Frank was describing. And Frank was the only guy that I could sing along with. I can't sing along normal songs. They're lousy or something. But I can actually remember and sing Zappa songs because they're on the right frequency. They're dealing with the Iondom reality. The mind of Zappa, the world of non-physical Ion, is there in the music. So I could hear it.
I suppose because you are also used to more complex pattern making. Yeah. You also need some type of more complex music because it's like I cannot stand listening to simple pop songs.
Right.
And then they repeat it again, like they do the whatever the solo, and then they repeat the same thing, and it's like, I cannot.
So you turn off the radio.
Like, it's enough.
Right, you turn off the radio, and you go to the convent to escape it, and that doesn't work, so you go to a lab of Gurdjieffian adults and hang out with them, not hearing any pop music for a few years, because you can't stand it.
Yes, and even now. Yes, but Zappa has so many things going on that somehow you can start following the rhythms or the harmonies or the text and this and that, so you don't get bored.
Right.
There is all this information there.
That's what it is, information. And
that makes it more tactile.
I don't know music. I don't know how to count off 17, 18 rhythms, 6, 10 time. I know nothing on the ear mathematical level, but I can dance to it or respond to it. So I'm listening to Zappa, and I'm not hearing all the technical stuff that you're hearing, but I know it's completing, or it's communicating. So actually, I enjoy the fact I don't understand music so that I can enjoy it without thinking about it. You think about it. You look for something that will attract your complex musical mind. I enjoy just something. And maybe it's my non-physical enjoying Zappa. You know what I mean? More than my Labyrinth of the Mind. But most cultures Labyrinth of the Mind stuff, and so people need a certain level of simplicity or complexity in what they consume. But I'm responding to something in Frank that I'm not musically, technically knowledgeable enough to understand. That's why you lead this discussion. You analyze, you know the mechanical stuff.
Well, no, I'm just proposing some topics that I think we all participate in. Explore.
Yes. We couldn't have said what we're saying without your input. You wouldn't have got me rhapsodizing on this level unless you or Bert said things that pushed the dialogue. You know what I mean? So you get some credit.
No, Roxana said earlier about pop music. I remember reading about Frank had a problem, not a problem, but he noticed how music fell into what he called nominalism. And that's some type of technical term that
Wait a minute. Nominalism was McLuhan's enemy in his public role. Nominalism was the bad guy. Frank said the word nominalism?
I believe, yes. I had to find the article, but nominalism, how music, you just use certain plain tones just to sell a product, and it wasn't really real music. And he called it nominalism.
Right. He actually called it nominalism. That's incredible.
Let me look it up.
You got to find that interview. You got to find that. I've never seen that. That's an important statement. I mean, that's technically what I would be telling Frank back in the 70s, quoting McLuhan's PhD or something. And maybe he remembered what I said, but yeah, you got to.
Let me. I'll go offline for a quick. I have a hard copy of it. I have to find the hard copy real quick.
Awesome. Let's hear that. I'm almost saying he didn't say nominalism. I can't believe he said that. Because he wasn't academically versed in scholarly terms like that. But if it's said later in his life, he had time to read and get educated. He certainly, I don't think, would say that in the 60s. Unless John Cage wrote something like that, and he got it from Cage or Schoenberg or somebody. But that's an incredible statement. The problem is visual space, and visual space is nominalist. It does not consider that the word evokes its own meaning and names. It's like the onomatopoeia. Nominalism is that any word can be called anything. They ignore the aesthetics of the frequency of the word. It's like the Eskimo is not nominalist. They say, how can I know stone without the word stone? The nominalist would say, that rock over there, I could call it a tree. It doesn't matter what I call it. They don't recognize the power of the naming, the acoustic part of the object you see. So hypersensitivity to the rhythms and rates and cycles in sound would be a non-nominalist perception, which I guess if Frank knew that's what he was. He wasn't nominalist. Now, John Cage tends toward nominalism. See, nominalism started to dominate when the printing press came in.
Where did you say McLuhan mentioned that?
It is a major theme in his PhD. See, you had in the time of Abelard and Heloise, when was that? Like 1200 A.D. And they were nominalists. They caused a nominalist revolution against the rhetorical grammarian tradition. And then it faded out, and the rhetorical grammarians came back, and they had a great renaissance in the time of Shakespeare and the complex poetry of that period. Then the printing press came in and started to level everything. So Ramus, the educational philosopher, came in and said, we got to drop the rhetorical, grammatical, word-sensitive tradition and since we have to live faster and more efficiently, let's go to simple naming. And that leaks over into mathematics. And that's what came in with Newton. Descartes and Newton simplified the depth of rhetorical grammarian. Since you weren't going anywhere in the Middle Age, you'd sit around and resonate with the multi-level meanings because you were in acoustic space. But once you had visual space, you could start looking for the China, or looking for what was over the horizon, and then you discover a new world, and then you exploit it. Conquer nature, which was inside the visual space framework. All that led to a more, they demanded less poetic, flowery language. And then that became the hedonistic calculus, became math, algebra. And that's lumped in with the idea that we moved to dialectics, dominating rhetoric and grammar, and nominalism taking over. So the poets, who were rhetorical grammarians, the Jonathan Swifts, the Alexander Popes and that, they objected to this new nominalist dominance. They called it a dark age, which Ian would agree with, because that's what he said. Dark age comes in with the printing press. That is, Ian is siding with the team that McLuhan celebrates in his PhD, because the electric age returns us to autotactile space, where we're not going anywhere anymore. You can't go anywhere visually because everybody's in touch with everybody electronically. So then we get bogged down to studying things in depth.
You cannot go private.
Yeah, you cannot go private. It's like Zappa says in Lumpy Gravy, drums are noisy. There's no place you can hide. You're in the electronic tribal drum. And so rhetoric and grammar comes back in with the beatniks and some of the vortices, like the Baroque sensibility of Finnegan's Wake, the flowery, excessive Rococo designs of Finnegan's Wake, like Baroque architecture, which was an antidote to the plain Calvinist Puritan architecture of the first effects of the printing press. So the Baroque and the rhetorical grammatical tradition comes back as poetry, a renaissance of poetry in the 20th century, and dialectic starts to look weak. The scientist becomes a ridiculed phenomenon in pop culture because he's talking a very plain language. He doesn't communicate to the multisensory, new tactile mud that people were swimming in. So how's that for a mouthful, Bert? Did you find the quote?
Yes, but I was wrong. I got my terms mixed up. Frank was referring to minimalism in music.
See?
Minimalism.
Now, you knew about nominalism from... I predicted it wasn't true.
I knew nominalism. Yeah, you're right.
Right, but you learned nominalism from me. You projected Bob knowledge into that.
Yes.
You've heard me say that. But
yes.
That's how much... I know Frank does not go to that level of academic sophistication. He couldn't have said nominalism. It would be absolutely astounding if he had said that. And you heard me. I predicted he could. He did not say it. You misread it. For once in my life, my prediction came true. Let's celebrate that.
No, you had a lot of predictions come true. You had a lot of predictions come through.
Another thing that you told me yesterday, I think, about the symbolism.
Yeah.
That
symbolism,
really
that's
amazing.
a good thing. Okay. In the medieval period, I'll explain that in relate to what I just said. That you can apply symbolism to the same pattern.
Yes.
In the medieval period, which was a multi-level, in-depth society with a bit of a visual aspect, because they were doing, in Western culture, they were doing manuscripts in the phonetic alphabet. They weren't doing that in primitive Russia or primitive China or Africa, but in Europe they were dealing with the visual space of the manuscript. But it was a balanced culture. It didn't have the extreme effect of the printing press, which just swamped everything. It was a monster medium. So in the medieval period, being a balanced communication ecology, they regarded everything as a symbol. Everything was a symbol. Nothing was what it looked like. And that you can see it in normal histories of medieval period, that the common knowledge, the common scholarly perception was that nothing was just a naked object. It was a symbol of relationships with other objects. And that's what's in the Bible. All kinds of relating symbolic structures interacting with each other, like you have the 7 churches, the 7 vials, the 7 judgments, the 7 this, the 7 that. That's 749 levels of a situation. And the Evergreen said that scholars and monks back then would smoke marijuana so they could get into a multi-level awareness, like overcome their visual bias, slight visual bias, so they could go over the same scripture and get new ideas, hallucinate new ideas in the scripture. And that was the point, was you had to come up with new original commentary. So they would use psychedelics and that to get deeper levels. And then that all comes back in the 60s because we're moving into a retrieved medieval environment. It's more than medieval, but it includes the medieval multi-level once we get over the dark age of the printing press. So symbolism is multi-leveled in the medieval. That's why the alchemical texts are very complex. They're like the angel diagram, right? Very complex symbolism. Mm-hmm. That's what Dan Winter and the John Dee cult people like, all those ancient, weird, multi-leveled alchemical texts. So then that gets symbolism becomes reduced to plain Puritan clothing, no Baroque decoration like the courtiers in Versailles, in the courts. They had plain nothing, and that's mathematics. That's let X equal B plus C. Now that's supposed to be a poem, but it becomes very plain symbols. Mathematical symbols. So plain, visually biased, limited, one-level symbolism rules for 300 years as arithmetic and math. And any sort of right hemisphered or sensitive kid who can perceive multiple levels hates math. And McLuhan has a neat statement about the kids who hate math have a certain bias, and those who love math have a certain bias. I can't remember it right now, but it's in Cultures Are Business. So math is the crux. So then you come into the 20th century, the telegraph, and electric depth, which obsolesces surface movement forward, or efficient causality, which is what visual space and the printing press brought in. Now there's nowhere to go when you have the telegraph and the telephone where you can communicate through the whole environment. So you're now back stuck in the Amazonian jungle like the primitive tribes were, and they would take drugs to travel the boring Amazon limited range they lived. Remember in New Guinea, 500 tribes, and they never left their little valley and went over and talked to the other tribe. They would explore depths, multi-worlds, with their drugs, ayahuasca and whatever. So you started in the 20th century, have a retrieval of the Papua New Guinea jungles, and every country is a valley of acoustic and tactile depth, and then people first use alcohol to explore it, then they use all the cocaine and the other drugs. So that's the common retrieval of medieval awareness in the 20th century. So symbolism gets more complex again through modern art, or Schwaller-Lubitsch analyzing the pyramid, finding the multiple depths, and so multi-level symbolism comes back. Well, the transition from simple symbolism of the Romantic poets to complex symbolism of the 20th century is what was known as the symbolists. Baudelaire, Rimbaud, Mallarmé, and Laforgue, they started to use symbols as broken things. They discouraged you matching one meaning to their poetry. They broke it up so that it was trying to show writing as multi-leveled. And then Joyce built on that. But the symbolists, the technical poets in the late 19th century, which we call symbolists, were retrieving multi-leveled symbolism, or medieval symbolism. That's why they would study Japanese art and Chinese art, because they knew there was something there that Raphael and Da Vinci and the normal perspective guys and the Rembrandt guys didn't have. Right? Okay? It was very eloquent. Mm-hmm. Now, all of this falls away under Iondom condition. We include it, but you get understandings of how ion is multi-level communicating. Ion is retrieval of medieval symbolism, but even ayahuascan symbolism, and even early 20th century symbolism, and plus more than that to the secret chart I got on my wall here for parallel worlding. That's what symbols were originally used for.
Yes, but it's like a total different understanding of the symbols, like when he's talking about things in the Bible that are chemistry, or
right.
That
chemistry is alchemical.
Situations that are
chemistry
that are to come, like this is America, this is this situation in the economy, the churches are the banks. So that there is no way to relate to the correspondence of the metaphor or the symbol. There is somehow some type of association, but how can you associate something in the Bible with like the church and a bank, or
right, Deutsche Bank?
Different.
Well, you find out that Deutsche Bank is the Ottoman Empire.
And chemistry.
Yeah. modern ion takes chemistry, like talking about the hypothalamus, and relates it to the thalamus and to the autonomic system and the lipids and the lysine. Ion is retrieving in-depth chemistry, including how it's symbolized in the Bible or symbolized by someone else in that text that the Ninth Gate is based on. The multi-leveled symbolism in chemistry is the richest part of ion. You know what I mean? He's making science better than science knows. He's making the words and concepts of matter and the body processes so deep and resonant and shows where it goes. Where you hear, when I play later, I read this section on MDMA, which is known as ecstasy. What does ecstasy do to the brain? It's fucking unbelievably poetic. How ion explains what MDMA does. I read him what scientists say, and then he corrects the scientists. It's awesome. You actually get a beautiful, if you follow a bit of it, you'll get a visual epiphany or a beautiful painting from what he's pointing out to you. So ion is composing. You know, composers wrote complex music because words weren't deep enough. So they make this Beethoven multiple-level, well-tempered scale polyphony. They're trying to show the complexity. And music does that. It's deeper than the printed book level, which is called equitone. The monotone equitone is limited, so you get into music. Then you got movies, and they try to show depth or abstract poetry. Ion is richer than all of them by speech. You know what I mean? It's speech compositions. By absorbing all the different models and systems available. And every now and then he's got to do a real fast rant, right? Just to cover that part of the interactions of matter and words.
Yes, and for example, McLuhan thought the computer was the thing that was going to help us program and orchestrate the terrestrial and the galactic environment and energies in a harmonious way.
Very well quoted. Terrestrial and galactic. Perfect. That's right. You have to realize what you just quoted. You get to talk like Bob there, Bert. Roxy's becoming Bob-like with that sentence. Programmed like a global thermostat, the terrestrial and galactic environments. That's straight out of War and Peace.
Yes, but
you can't say
that's
that
why
yet,
they
Bert.
were saying he must be on LSD, because what is he talking about? But,
yeah.
To do that, we need something more than computers. We needed ion and the cloud.
That's right. And that's why McLuhan says a bunch of stuff in normal equitone prose, and then he has to put a complex passage for Finnegan's Wake to say, well, this is what I'm trying to show you. I can't do Finnegan's Wake, but I'll do it simply. But Finnegan's Wake, which is more complex, beside this paragraph, is showing more than what I'm saying in my simple English prose. You get that, Bert? Did Bert drop off? Let me see. Yeah, Bert dropped off. That's Are you there, Bert?
Yes.
It's interesting that
I missed what you said, though, Bob. I just came back in.
Oh, I gotta say, I said you missed that whole terrestrial galactic thing. All of a sudden, Ian goes. McLuhan realized you could use a computer as a global thermostat to program terrestrial and galactic environments. Now, that's literally pretty close to what I am saying, what's in Global Village. And I was saying, holy shit, Roxy's starting to talk like Bob. And I said, Bert, you couldn't have said that. You haven't done your McLuhan War and Peace homework enough to say that. But she actually said it. She had terrestrial and galactic environments because the galaxy... And Bert missed it.
Yeah, McLuhan thought that the computer is going to give us this ability to do that. But I say...
Yeah, the speed.
We need more than the computer. We need the non-physical and the cloud to do it.
Yeah, before you get to ion, understand what the computer was fast enough and could handle many operations, so it could program global economies, adjusting the media ratios. Like you would say, civil war broke out in Venezuela. They got too much radio, so we'll turn off radio and just bomb them with newspapers, which is softer and just more visual. So that would calm down the tribal heating up that caused by radio. But the programming, the computer can handle the multi-level, and that's an extension of the corpus callosum, or whatever part of the brain that we call tactility, that organizes sensory data coming in and makes coherent consciousness. So the model of the brain doing that, so you can have coherent sensory perception, is modeled by the computer, run like an air traffic controller. You got planes coming in, planes going out, and the complexity, he would call the airport traffic controller was a model of how he wanted to manage the global society, the global theater, and that's the computer. That's the complexity of the computer. Well, it went from mainframe computers to digital computers, and it got so fast that McLuhan's scenario wouldn't be good. You couldn't run it like that. Basically, the way to say it is, we failed to program the environment in the 60s, so we killed ourselves. Right? Return to essence. Humans died in the late 60s. No more humans. Now it's Android meme. Technologies now run the show. And the technology starts programming the global environment, and we call it the pentatic. That's them doing tetrad communication ecological programming, terrestrial and galactic, with the through the machinic. Not humans. The machinic is doing it somehow. And so we went to the pentad, and then that collapsed in 2008. 9 months later, pregnancy, ion comes forth. And it started with me and James in July doing my seminars for 9 months. I was growing ion for 9 months, and then in March, from July to March is 9 months, and then ion burst forth with the new form of programming. Like Rafi was just saying. What did you call it? What was it? Two types of programming.
The terrestrial and the galactic.
No, there was that. That was McLuhan. But you said two types of ion programming.
What we need is the ionic and the cloud.
Oh yeah, the cloud and the pillar or fire. That's right. The two. What is it? A cloud of glory and the pillar of fire. Those were the two. That was the update of terrestrial and galactic. Yes, the new cloud.
It's a great pattern, Roxana.
Yes, and the lucidity that nature is both first nature and second nature is one creation. Is one environment. Is like any other thunder that we have been creating all these labs in which we have been experimenting our expansion.
Well, that was always the theme in James Bond. That James Bond had to go find out where the secret lab was, and he'd always find an island with guards, robot guards, that all get blown up by evil Dr. No, as Dr. No ran around hiding and protecting himself when Bond was attacking. Right? They'd blow up Dr. No's lab. It's always the same theme, but it was literal. That was more the actual news than any news that Walter Cronkite was putting out. That was the big picture that people didn't know how to get a picture of. Bond movies, and McLuhan used to say that. Here's this great professor, and regular professors thinking this Bond is junk movies, bullshit, and McLuhan would come out in the mid-60s and say, well, it's a CIA world, it's a James Bond world. And, that's like to the literate professor, what do you mean, it's a B movie? You're saying the world's a B movie, Marshall? Come on, that's putting down everything we stand for. But they didn't know the B movie was accurate. It's like Zappa going into rock and roll and bringing back Room the Jets' 50s doo-wop. It was glorious music. And the scholars of Mozart and Beethoven said, well, Frank's so stupid, doing that shit. He must be parodying it. But he used to always celebrate the complexity of the kids on the street corner making these amazing a cappella fucking songs. Multiple level. Well, if you can't hear that, then I do have good ears because I can hear the complexity of the doo-wop guys. You know what I mean? At least I can figure that out. But okay, now you come to this neat insight.
Another thing is how the programming now also requires that the non-physical starts talking like Adam did in the Garden of Eden when we fell, and he started naming things. And
you'll see that in J.D. We talked about J.D. Salinger. We talked about J.D. Salinger. He talks about the fall leads to logic in his Franny and Zooey book. So that's the simple idea that, yes, speech, and McLuhan has in Understanding Media, speech, flower of evil. Like the simple Gnostic view is the fallen world says speech and logic is bad. That's mind, too much mind. That's a simple dialectical symbolism. But the idea that that Adam started speaking, which was a fallen condition, Umberto Eco has this book about all poetry trying to get back to the original Edenic Garden of Eden language. I think it's called prelapsarian language. That's a big theme in alchemical initiation. So, yes, speaking was a fallen condition in some traditions. Is that what you're saying, Roxy? Adam started to fall, so he had to speak.
To program the new environment, the ionic galaxy,
right?
It was required that also non-physical speaks and talks.
Right.
The
bliss of non-physical had to enter the world of contrasting physical.
Yes, but for me, this is the most amazing, that the non-physical is talking back to us.
Right. So here's where Bob's creativity comes in. Here's where, within this sequence we're talking about, from the analog tetradic part of the first half of the 20th century, then you move into the pentadic, and then the hexad with ion. Here's Bob's particular position. You learn from McLuhan that there was first nature and technology was second nature. So humans were imitating first nature, which was given to us by God, some external something, and we mimed it with second nature. Well, I recognize that the satellite was a merger of first nature and second nature, and it's spelled out in my essay, Up the Aura for Andy, written in 95. So this is what blew Nelson Saul away. The night I told it to him in 95, he goes, how did Marshall miss this? How did Marshall miss the merging of the first, second nature? So he was just stunned that Marshall, his guru, didn't get it, and Bob came up with it. So I then went on to say that we're in a post-friction, a new merger of first and second nature, symbolized by the satellite environment, which then led to Pons inflation's cold fusion, which was a merging of first and second nature. So there was no friction between second nature technology and first nature frictionless, because a lot of first nature is frictionless. The sun just goes on and on and on, and then it dies and it becomes another sun. So there's an eternity in first nature, which humans could never imitate or technologize. So they were trying to. Well, they broke through with cold fusion. So the fusion of the satellite symbolized the coming fusion of cold fusion. So I spelled out the merger of first and second nature. No one had done that. But I didn't know the full implications of that, because that meant ion, that the guff would merge with physical. Not physical would merge with physical. So I created the poetry in my essay, the statement of the merger in first and second nature, which was a new clarification that ion brought forth, and then that leads to Roxy's blinding insight. Holy shit, there's no difference between first nature and second nature. That humans made first nature, not God, humans made it, as well as second nature. So that's my positioning in the history of thought. I'm the philosopher of that point. And I guess my reward was, since I figured it out, or came up with this sort of invention of explaining technologically how we had first and second nature and how that was cold fusion, then I had the right to get the benefits, which was ion, which was the actualization of more than what I meant.
Frank Zappa said the torture never stops, because that was the situation of all the last founders. There was always this pain and freak out and more bodies, more fragmentation, more quadrophenia, more drugs,
more stress, more pleasure, more divorce,
the torture,
more bastards, more pollution, more bitches, stupid millennials. Fucked up baby boomers. I mean, that's what Hillary and Bill Clinton are fucked up baby boomers. I mean, they were born in 46, which is the year they designate as the beginning of baby boomers. I think Hillary's 47, but he's 46. Croker's 45. He's just a year before the baby boomer statistic. But he's part of it. Even Zappa, even the Beatles, these guys born in 40, 41, 42, they're part of the baby boomer phase. Now you get William Irwin Thompson and Robert Anton Wilson, the guys born in the 30s. In the late 20s, like Andy Warhol, Don Thiel, and Baudrillard, they're not baby boomers. They're the Depression generation, what I call the number 7 generation, which is symbolized by the LaRouche quadrant. They're back there in the dark world, the dark ages of the electric phase. McLuhan's dark ages, not Ion's dark age. And it was a terrible time, massive depression, nuclear war, bombs, huge armies, and plagues, and crap, People walking around with one dress they wore their whole life, a dirty dress, in the Depression, in the Dust Bowl. That's before the affluence of the baby boomer world, which happens after World War II. It's a poor world in the 20s and 30s. I mean, there is the burst of wealth in the cities, but that just destroys everybody, and, the Great Gatsby documents that.
Yes.
So,
what an amazing odyssey.
Yes, yeah. And here's a comment. In the peanut gallery, somebody named Turkey Palat is going, "Nice riff, Bob." And he goes, "Bob's on a tear of Apillian proportions." Now, that's a very accurate statement. Who is this Turkey Palat? They know some of the McLuhan level, because, yes, I'm doing a little epic. 24 hours is a big epic. That's epic. But a little epic is Apillian. So he's actually correct. And then he says, "Ion does beaucoup de sprechstimme." Now, who the fuck? This is someone who knows Bob knowledge. Who is Turkey Palat? he's surfacing. Look, he's saying Ion does much sprechstimme, which is song and speech, right? Sprechstimme is a word that Zappa used. That's right. The new song is sprechstimme. Very good, Mr. Palat. Mr. Turkey Palat? What the fuck? What's he think he is, the Ottoman Empire?
Genau.
This is an Al-Qaeda terrorist. This is Osama bin Laden's son. They know this Sufi knowledge. And he's saying, "Yeah, Bob, yes, we here in Turkey can dig you, Bob. We know about the Apillian. We know about Veronian satire. Fuck the Menippean satire. Bob, you're a Veronian satire." Ion, that's a very good statement. Ion does beaucoup de sprechstimme. We'll probably find out it's Legend or somebody. A.S.A. Scott, probably. He's evolved beyond unpredicted proportions. Turkey Palat. Very good, Turkey. You ought to come on board. We should hear you. Do you have the guts? And this is the test. Have you got the guts to speak? Right? You can know and have Bob's alchemical symbolism down pat and know how to break the code and mirror the code back to me. But will you dare come in and swim with Ion? That's the test. It took Roxy 4 years of intense study and examination and slow deliberation about whether she's being conned or not before she dared to come in. Right? Oh, I think she got bounced off. Did you get bounced off, Roxy? Where are you?
I'm back.
Yeah. Did you hear my satire of you? Did you hear what I said?
No.
I said, I was explaining how Turkey Palat, he's got the code, he's broken down, he knows what words to throw at me, very good sentences typed out. But now he has to have the guts to come in and swim with Ion. And I said, I'll repeat it, I said, Roxy took her 4 years of slow, paranoid deliberation about whether she was being conned or not. Slow 4 years of analysis before Roxy would dare come in. Right, Roxy?
About
5 years.
Now, Bert jumped in pretty good. You got to give Bert credit.
Without
what, Roxy? What are you saying?
That I would have never called in without all this freaky stuff happening, like you showing up here. I caused portable and all that.
That's right. If I had not shown up, who knows what fucking adult state of mind, because you would have been still hiding out, wouldn't have participated, you wouldn't have got mutated. You're damn fucking lucky I showed up and guided you through your week of on the cross. You were on the cross for a week, being crucified on the road to Emmaus. And you were videotaping it all the while. I mean, Jesus never got to videotape his own crucifixion. Roxy got to videotape her own crucifixion. And then post it later. But, yeah, you had to go through that. And I used to always claim that, to get Bob knowledge, you eventually have to meet me
I remember,
interact with me.
For some reason, I felt like we had to go to the Ishtar tour. Like, we have to go to the Ishtar tour. We have to go to the Ishtar tour.
Right.
Well, I don't know.
Where Pergamon was, right?
Yes. Yes, we also did the Pergamon, but for some reason I felt like we had to go to the Ishtar Gate. Maybe.
Well, partly you had studied for years.
Why?
See, that was an important archetype, assumption, meme in your social motor brain makeup. And you had studied that. You knew there was something important there. So you had to take Bob there to your cultural shrine of an important thing that you'd looked at many times throughout the years, went back to the museum and looked at it and said, there's something here. What is it? And you had to test me with it. You had to put me in front of it and record me saying it. I had to perform in front of your shrine,
well, I think,
which was...
No, I think it's an archetype of many things, like the conquering of visual space, the beginning of writing.
Oh, that's what
and
it
the
is.
wolf.
But I'm saying this artifact hypnotized you. You didn't know how to see through it. You didn't know all the meanings. So it was lingering there. It's what we call a mortar thing that you have to see through. And I gave you the means to see through it. And to understand it is to kill it. And it doesn't fascinate you because you understand it, and then simple down once you understand it. I had to perform in front of it through a major assumption of your Berlin cultural life. A major environment, right? Can you get that?
Yes, for me, the revelation was this thing you do as a code breaker that you see an object and you expand on what it's really representing and what it was retrieved during the 30s. Like with the movies and
it's amazing rap I do. It's a very complex rap I do, talking about why people notice this stuff, because radio retrieved the sensibility that would notice the wall. So they went and brought it over because radio made them notice it. They wouldn't have noticed it before that. So it's very complex. Now here's what's funny. We see pictures of Man Ray, Duchamp, and the other artists in museums or looking at things. But we have a videotape of Bob explaining it while dealing with the average fascist culture of the fucking museum guards. Stop touching that! And I'm there. I have to turn over and apologize to the guard while I'm revealing the secret knowledge. That's modern life, because corporations, the fascism of corporations are guarding you while you're looking at these stupid old artifacts. And that's what's funny. You don't have Man Ray fighting off the museum guard while he's trying to reveal the secret stuff to a young lady.
Yes, and for example, you also did this thing in front of the map of Europe that is.
Oh, the Germany. I was going to bring that up. Ion goes on about the German thing. And Kim, I think, her questions evoked the importance of the Deutsche Bank and Ottoman and Germany, because it went from the Ottoman to Pergamon to Germany, which Roxy's been talking about too. I suddenly remembered that's what I was explaining when we stood in front of the 2,000-year history of Germany in the museum. They go through the whole history with these dates, and I'm quickly explaining each phase. I'm reviewing what Ion revealed today.
Yes, they're talking about video. The 418 glue.
Yeah, okay, well, here we are in Cyprus in 400 AD, and we're fighting off. And then we got new stuff to add to it. Now I killed the Templars long before anybody knew the Templars were there, and then I worked with the Medicis. It's awesome. It's just like Phineas Wake. every week you get on Payday and we retell the same story with new dimensions, just like every other page of Phoenix Wake. It's the same story with new aspects. That's what we're doing. Retelling the same ritual.
This is why, I mean, we cannot talk about Zappa just like everybody else and do some music and do a biography or something. We are talking of...
We're talking for
Zappa
the
as
ages.
An environment related
People will listen
to you.
To this. Yeah, if there's any humanity left in if there's not just bacteria like Frank predicted, if there's humans, they will listen to this. Not David Wally's book, not Ben Watson's book. Oh, they might read it, but nobody is going into the profundity of how an artist can be resonant with its time and predict the technology coming, which Bach and Mozart all did this process, which McLuhan explains and other people add to. This is the most incredible explanation of Zappa, including the guy who is inheriting the work of Frank, me, explaining where Frank was going. See, this is, most people today would say this is absolute fucking idiot, and they're not going to listen to it. But in 100 years, the kids will listen to it. They'll have time. They'll be put in tubes, and will sit there for years just listening and having all these tapes going through their head, like the Evergreen story about the kid in 2078. He's living in a tube, like a matrix tube, and he thinks he has a girlfriend. He thinks he travels all over the world and all this stuff, and he doesn't. He's inside a programmed test tube, like Keanu Reeves in The Matrix. And they have the light.
A new type of lab.
What?
It will be a new type of lab.
A new lab. That's right. A new lab.
Yeah.
And Ion is trying to give a choice. You don't want to totally end up like this stupid kid being grown in a lab. You know, that's a bit limited. So we're presenting a different way, because that's boring science. That's limited science will lead to that fucked up thing that will cause all kinds of problems and diseases. But our science will bypass the disservices of that matrix. It'll include it, but you'll be able to play with it easier. Like Hollywood is right now, J.J. Abrams or somebody is making a fantastic movie with all the greatest, latest fucking visual effects they can do, what CGI they call it, all these effects, and amazing stuff that'll dazzle the mind, but none of it is as dazzling as a Payday with Ion there. You know what I mean? They cannot out-dazzle us.
Yeah.
Because who can explain Ion?
It's also
Nobody.
amazing how, for example, what you were doing without really knowing what you were doing.
Right.
What was that for?
Right. Right.
Complements
I'm still doing it.
What Caroline was doing. Yes.
Right.
It's like you had to complement each other, because the different aspects of the physical body and all the other
because
bodies,
two conversations.
The other thunders.
Roxy, remember the original first wisdom from Ion is there's two conversations. Me and Carol are the two conversations about the unfolding of Iondom. Now, here's an interesting point. Neufeld, he watched this since 1985. He's pretty good at marveling at what Bob and Carol were doing, and he writes incredible emails trying to talk about it. I could read a couple. Like he's a good talker of what you're saying about what we're unfolding. He watched it for 40 years. And it's 30 years. And, I could read some of his emails he wrote to me and Alyssa the other day, me and Alyssa and Nate, trying to explain last week's Payday when Ion targeted him and started mocking his old lab that he was doing, his vinyl lab, his buying these old technologies. So Dave got so described by Ion, he had to come in. Well, I told him yesterday, you need to start using Ion to fix up your lab. So he came in today, and we witnessed that amazing conversation. And, Dave started to write articles in the early 90s about the lab. And when I went to New York in 93 or so, there was a little magazine called Wavelength, which is this great Van Morrison song I played tonight. Karen goes, who's doing that? I said, Van Morrison. She said, I never heard him do that. That's the best band I've ever heard. But I've never heard of it before, but I found it and played it. So and it was called Wavelength. But Dave did Wavelength. And when I would come to Toronto in 95, 96, he would read me, and he'd do these Bob rants. It would be a mixture of May, Brussels, LaRouche, and McLuhan in his street lingo, but it was a pretty good mixture of Bob Quadrophenia, and the readers were amazed at what he was writing. But he was just processing like Kiggy Bob knowledge. So it's interesting what he saw. What you're being amazed at, Roxy, Dave would articulate it through the years. He just suddenly go into a rant and try to do this amazing explanation of Bob.
Yes, because he saw the metamorphosis of the Church of the Subgenius.
Yes. Stang called him up. Fennell. So Reverend Stang called up Dave and said, okay, I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at Bob, because he thought I designed the album, but I didn't. But he thought I organized. He says, you're very talented, Dave. I recognize your ability as an editor. Why don't you join us? And Stang wanted him to defect from me and join them. But Dave, to his credit, realized, no, it's tempting, but Stang doesn't know it. There's something going on with Bob and Carol that Stang didn't know about, that Dave said, no, I'm staying with Bob, which they thought was stupid. How could you stay with that fucking loser, Stang and them were saying? But he knew to stay. He knew, no, Stang, you don't know what's going on up here in Toronto. You don't know the details of Bob and Carol. I see it every day. So he rejected the seductive efforts of David Bowie to take Adrian Belew from Zappa. Remember that story? And he tried to apologize to Frank, David Bowie, and Frank just said, fuck you, Captain something, Captain Rogers or whatever he was called. He goes, fuck you, Captain Rogers. Major Tom, but Frank said it differently. He said Captain Rogers. And Bowie walks out trying to keep a good, like it wasn't as bad as he looked like, and he and Belew were embarrassed. He walked out, and Belew was amazed. Dave Bowie goes, that was pretty good. He tried to pretend it was an okay conversation. It's like Stang saying, boy, that was pretty bad. Bob's pretty stupid. It's the exact opposite of what was going on. Stang had misperceived what was happening, just as David Bowie misperceived what was happening with Zappa. And I'm trying to find a typed rant by Dave. Let's see, get one of these.
But
where
it's very interesting because I see that episode as the porn of what you were to become.
Right.
That was the joke about the cult.
Yeah.
And actually, I think it helped you to avoid to become a cult.
Right. I agree. You go back and listen to what I was saying in the late 80s or 90s as that service and then the album service. It was like I was the only one getting the joke. I was knowing their role, the Church Subgenius, their temporary service, where they were fucking up. And I was just surfing over the whole thing with incredible commentary. You go back and listen to what I had said about the church, ironically, and that's different levels. I really was on the ball about I had something coming that they didn't understand. And the first guy to realize that was Lovejob. He comes on five-bodied a month or two before Iron showed up and shows all these words ending in ION, and he says, I've just decided to talk to Stang. They need to merge with you, Bob. Their church is floundering. They need to work with you. And he was saying all this a month or two before Iron showed up, which was the crowning proof of the role or value of Dobbstown. You know what I mean? And he predicted it. Stupid fucking Lovejob, who once it happened, all he did was call into cash flow and go, hey, what's up, guys? It's like his brain and he'd made such a Herculean effort of figuring it out, but that was as far as he could go. And he just was this dead zombie going, hey, what's up? hey, we all laugh at him and then hang up on him. He's like an early version of Corbin. But he actually, who would have believed that dumb guy was the prophet of Ion? Or of Ion in relation to the Church Subgenius.
Wow.
I'm trying to find a Dave rant.
That is nothing compared to the dimension of the environment becoming.
Right.
It's really... it's a real big joke with...
Here's Dave hearing something, I don't know, listening to What Youth, and he writes to me. He writes to everybody, Derek DeKirkhoff, Eric McLuhan, Dominique Dunant, all these big McLuhan people in the academic world. They're all on the list. And the topic is, I announced to everybody my 94th birthday party, which ends up in a bar in Minneapolis with an Ionot reunion. So that's about Gene and Alyssa and Nate, and we all had that on the phone on What Youth. It's a 7-8 hour thing. So Dave responds by going, I'm one of the vampires listening to the What Youth. Okay, so Eric McLuhan opens this, and here's somebody saying, I'm one of the vampires in quotes, listening to the What Youth show archives of last Tuesday's show, while you, Bob, provide content and engagement for me. Praise Bob. It's cool, considering Bob's expertise on hidden environments and effects. He's also the hottest content generator provider. I'm loving it. Bob forever. Now, Eric, what the fuck is Dave going on about? It's beautiful. And then he says, hey, and he follows up. And he says, now this wasn't to the group. This is just to me and Alyssa and Nate. And he says, this is February 7th. Hey, that was a wild payday. This is about last Saturday. Hey, that was a wild payday. I heard it from about 11 to 4, and then about 10 to 1 or the close. That was pretty dramatic, with Roxy threatening to stop participating. And then she totally lashed out at, I think, Eliza at the end. It was pure bile, and it sounded wild as Bob played the outro. That was the Zappa thing, we played... Roxy came in and yelled at Eliza right as the show was ending. Then he says, you're chatting with Ion while the guys were in the Starbucks. That would be Dave, that would be Alyssa and Nate. Well, it's funny. No, and Chad and Kate. The strange thing about all of this, now here's Dave processing it. The strange thing about all this is I've always thought I've understood and had a handle on theories and ideas. But I got to say, I feel like a kid in grade 1 who's dazed out in the class while the kids talk about rivers and symbols and names I'm just not very familiar with. It's a novel feeling for me to say I feel like a bit of a space cadet on the Ion thing, and I'm confused on what to ask. He's actually admitting that he's always superior to everybody. He's saying, I'm starting to fucking feel stupid among this scene, Bob. This is unprecedented. I can't feel stupid. I'm the smartest guy around, And he's admitting last week, and then a week later he comes in and he performs one of the greatest dialogues with Ion we ever heard. But a week ago, he's feeling insecure. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then he goes, by the way, I've been also loving the What Youth shows, Bob. You were particularly on fire when Roxy was threatening to quit. It was a Bob suasion in full effect. I don't even know what he's talking about. Roxy wasn't even there, but maybe I was explaining on Tuesday. Is that what I did first? Persuasion. It was a Bob suasion in full effect. I might have been explaining to people who came in, what the hell happened? I heard this rumor, this fight broke out, and I guess I explained it in a Bob way that impressed Dave. But that's Dave. I mean, he's very verbose. You know what I mean? He says a lot of words there.
Yeah.
And then he goes on about when Ion nailed him. He says, he titles it Obsolete Before It Was Obsolete. And this is to me and Carolyn and Nate and Virginia and Alyssa. He goes, he. It was funny hearing Ion's doubts about the relevance of my activities. He goes, he. It's like a little kid who got caught, right? He's now out at recess with the kids saying, holy shit, the teacher caught me, man. So he say, it was funny hearing Ion's doubts about the relevance of my activities. And the 40s technology. He's right in the sense that this has no real impact on technology or music ultimately, even if it's really bossed by professional studio and production standards. It's more my fetish to manifest and totally understand and design a device that imparts a vibe and tone and expression that's useful for music and the kind of circuits that sonic historically excited me in the past and to experience the tactility of building it, but obviously not vital or crucial. But so much nowadays faces an uphill onslaught of invalidation and puniness in an Android recoded world, but this analog stage of a world of sorts was a necessary stage to have something to emulate digitally and make kind of disappear. It's an acknowledgement of a former methodology, like film or newspapers, etc. Then he goes into celebrating. He goes, the units aren't powered on in the pics. He's showing us pictures. They look cute when they're lit up, but my room's so messy that they photograph better in the hall where there's no three-prong outlets. But look at him processing what Ian had done to him. He's trying to defend his interest in 40s technology. And then he comes on, and that's all a rehearsal for what he did today. But he didn't know it, but he was rehearsing it, working out his mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's upgrading his lab.
Right. And now Paul Lafley is an interesting guy who Alyssa got fascinated with lately. So Dave finds out something about Paul Lafley, so he writes to Alyssa and he says, that Alyssa had that Lafley guy, Paul Lafley, he had some resonance with Ion and other things. I'll have to hear it again to really soak it up. I think he looked at a documentary or something on Paul Lafley that Alyssa sent us, but I haven't looked at it. I'll have to hear it again to really soak it up. But the guy's a cool dude, and I like his paintings and work. What's the scoop on this Lafley guy, Bob? He's into Bucky Fuller, I notice. I like how he's doing revisions on his time machine. Too fucking cool. So here's McLuhan's role. If you have the big view like McLuhan did, then the corporate guys, the heads of machines, of big corporations, they didn't understand what the big picture was, so they'd go to McLuhan to get the big picture. Right? Well, here's Dave, a top producer, going to Bob. He's, Bob, what's the perspective? What do I do about this Lafley guy? Give me the big picture, Bob. Right? That's what he's doing here. He's demanding me to consult with him.
Yes, because
so we play a Zappa song?
That's why I wanted to talk about this thing, because people have to understand that it's not about the person. It's right. An environment becoming.
Yes. And language and movies and songs are part of the code of the environment that's being communicated. And a painting doesn't contain it. That's why McLuhan started saying, well, TV is the new art, or radio. These environments are the new art form, and you have to start connecting with among them, not the contents of a puny little book or a puny little painting. That's obsolesced by the 30s. And then Joyce knows that, so he tries to make a book that includes the coding from all kinds of post-book environments. He saves the book. There's no book that can keep up with our time, but the Finney's Wake makes a damn good effort to stay relevant. It even can be seen as predicting Ion. Now, that's a pretty good book. And it's not a book about ideas or a plot or a moral or a mystery. It is showing the ionic environment, which is pretty incredible.
Yes, I think it's a very good... you're talking about the War and Peace? Or what?
No, I'm talking about Finnegan's Wake. Finnegan's Wake is the last book. and it's the Noah's Ark. He preserved the book so it could be forever. He said to me through the Evergreens, I don't want anybody to figure out what it means, so people will keep looking at it and searching in it. Once you know what a book's about, you put it on a shelf and never read it again. He said, I made sure that the book basically had no ultimate meaning that you could figure out, because then it would be figured out and that'd be it. Now, McLuhan and Eric used to brag that they figured it out and basically, one-up Joyce by actually figuring it out. And even James Joyce's grandson, agreed that Eric's book explains it. He's satisfied with it. So eventually Joyce does get obsolesced. And then Bob comes along and obsolesces the McLuhan. And then Ian comes along and obsolesces Bob and Carolyn. But they survive the fucking onslaught, and they're still here to maintain continuity.
Right.
Let's go see what the peanut gallery is saying. Go ahead,
I'm going to get something to drink. So I'm going to get something to drink.
Okay, just before you go, just before you go, let's see what Turkey Palat says. Turkey Palat says, merci, French for thank you, and he says it's James Pusty. Now, James knows his stuff. He's there from the beginning. He was the first guy to attempt to interview us. He's in Australia, and he's a Zappa fan, so it does make sense. James knows my stuff. And James would phone in if he could, and he was part of the rewrite. So that explains it. James is probably one of the few people who could write what he's writing. So then he writes, mwahaha, right. So he's laughing at me explaining him, an hour or so ago. And then Sue Bone comes in, who is sort of like Dave Neufeld. She's not as sophisticated intellectually as Dave Neufeld, but she saw what was unfolding too. So she says, superb salon creating tonight, Bob, Roxy, and Bert. Bravo! See, Sue can only cheer. She recognizes something's going on, but she can't go into the details like Dave can. You know what I mean? And spell out or what James is doing. So Sue learned a little more left hemisphere details so that you can say a few more words than just bravo. We're not impressed with bravo. That's just cop-out. That's just applauding. But she recognizes it's a superb salon. And then she says, okay, now she attempts to name what's going on. And she says, Rumpelstiltskin, when you name it, you have power over it. You own it. Now, I've said that a million times, and she knows that. She's learned that much. But you need to update your image of what Rumpelstiltskin is, Sue. But, she's showing a little bit there. And then James Pusey comes back and says, check out Zappa's many bandmates, and it's sort of like a list in Wiki of all the people that played on Zappa records. Then Alyssa comes in, a musician, saying, loving the milk, nominalism, ionized Zappa talk. We'll be back in the morning. It's good that there is an archive of all this. Thanks, guys. So there it is, Roxy. You can go to the bathroom or the kitchen or wherever you're going. Compliments.
I do both.
We've read the telegrams. We've read the telegrams.